This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Jeremy Pavier. The Black Arrow, A Tale of the Two Roses, by Robert Louis Stevenson. Book 1, Chapter 5, Bloody as the Hunter. The lads lay quiet till the last footstep had melted on the wind. Then they arose, and with many an ache, for they were weary with constraint, clambered through the ruins and recrossed the ditch upon the rafter. Matcham had picked up the windac and went first, Dick following stiffly with his crossbow on his arm. "And now," said Matcham, "forth to Holywood." "To Holywood!" cried Dick. "When good fellows stand shot? Not I. I would see you hanged first, Jack." "You would leave me, would ye?" Matcham asked. "Ay, by my sooth," returned Dick. "An I be not in time to warn these lads, I will go die with them." "What! Would ye have me leave my own men that I have lived among? I trow not. Give me my windac." But there was nothing further from Matcham's mind. "Dick," he said, "ye swear before the saints that ye would see me safe to Holywood. Would ye be forsworn? Would ye desert me, a perjurer?" "Nay, I swear for the best," returned Dick. "I meant it too. But now But look ye, Jack, turn again with me. Let me but warn these men, and, if needs must, stand shot with them. Then shall all be clear, and I will on again to Holywood and purge mine oath." "Ye but deride me," answered Matcham. "These men ye go to succour are the same that hunt me to my ruin." Dick scratched his head. "I cannot help it, Jack," he said. "Here is no remedy. What would ye? Ye run no great peril, man, and these are in the way of death. Death!" he added. "Think of it! What a murrain do ye keep me here for? Give me the windac. St. George, shall they all die?" "Richard Shelton," said Matcham, looking him squarely in the face. "Would ye, then, join party with Sir Daniel? Have ye not ears? Heard ye not this Ellis, what he said? Or have ye no heart for your own kindly blood, and the father that men slew? Harry Shelton, he said, and Sir Harry Shelton was your father, as the sun shines in heaven." "What would ye?" Dick cried again. "Would ye have me credit thieves?" "Nay, I have heard it before now," returned Matcham. "The fame goeth currently, it was Sir Daniel slew him. He slew him under oath. In his own house he shed the innocent blood. Heaven wearies for the avenging on't, and you, the man's son, ye go about to comfort and defend the murderer." "Jack," cried the lad, "I know not. It may be. What know I? But see here, this man hath bred me up and fostered me, and his men I have hunted with and played among, and to leave them in the hour of peril! O, man, if I did that, I were stark dead to honour. Nay, Jack, ye would not ask it. You would not wish me to be base." "But your father, Dick," said Matcham, somewhat wavering, "your father, and your oath to me. Ye took the saints to witness." "My father!" cried Shelton. "Nay, he would have me go. If Sir Daniel slew him, when the hour comes, this hand shall slay Sir Daniel. But neither him nor his will I desert in peril. And for mine oath, good Jack, ye shall absolve me of it here, for the lives' sake of many men that hurt you not, and for mine honour, ye shall set me free." "I, Dick? Never!" returned Matcham. "An ye leave me, y' are forsworn, and so I shall declare it." "My blood heats," said Dick. "Give me the windac. Give it me." "I'll not," said Matcham. "I'll save you in your teeth." "Not!" cried Dick. "I'll make you." "Try it," said the other. They stood looking in each other's eyes, each ready for a spring. Then Dick leaped, and though Matcham turned instantly and fled, in two bounds he was overtaken. The windac was twisted from his grasp. He was thrown roughly to the ground, and Dick stood across him, flushed and menacing, with doubled fist. Matcham lay where he had fallen, with his face in the grass, not thinking of resistance. Dick bent his bow. "I'll teach you," he cried fiercely. "Oath or no oath, ye may go hang for me." Then he turned and began to run. Matcham was on his feet at once, and began running after him. "What do you want?" cried Dick, stopping. "What make ye after me? Stand off." "Will follow an I please," said Matcham. "This wood is free to me." "Stand back, by our Lady!" returned Dick, raising his bow. "Ah, you're a brave boy," retorted Matcham. "Shoot." Dick lowered his weapon in some confusion. "See here," he said, "y' have done me ill enough. Go, then. Go your way in fair wise, or, whether I will or not, I must even drive you to it." "Well," said Matcham doggedly, "y' are the stronger. Do your worst. I shall not leave to follow thee, Dick, unless thou makest me," he added. Dick was almost beside himself. It went against his heart to beat a creature so defenceless, and, for the life of him, he knew no other way to rid himself of this unwelcome and, as he began to think, perhaps untrue companion. "Y' are mad, I think," he cried. "Fool fellow, I am hasting to your foes. As fast as foot can carry me go I thither." "I care not, Dick," replied the lad. "If y' are bound to die, Dick, I'll die too. I would liever go with you to prison than go free without you." "Well," returned the other, "I may stand no longer prating. Follow me if ye must. But if ye play me false, it shall but little advance you. Mark ye that. Shalt have a quarrel in thine inwards, boy." So saying, Dick took once more to his heels, keeping in the margin of the thicket, and looking briskly about him as he went. At a good pace he rattled out of the dell and came again into the more open quarters of the wood. To the left a little eminence appeared, spotted with golden gorse, and crowned with a black tuft of firs. "I shall see from there," he thought, and struck for it across a heathy clearing. He had gone but a few yards when Matcham touched him on the arm and pointed. To the eastward of the summit there was a dip, and, as it were, a valley passing to the other side. The heath was not yet out; all the ground was rusty, like an unscoured buckler, and dotted sparingly with yews; and there, one following another, Dick saw half a score green jerkins mounting the ascent, and marching at their head, conspicuous by his boar spear, Ellis Duckworth in person. One after another gained the top, showed for a moment against the sky, and then dipped upon the further side until the last was gone. Dick looked at Matcham with a kindlier eye. "So y' are to be true to me, Jack?" he asked. "I thought ye were of the other party." Matcham began to sob. "What cheer!" cried Dick. "Now the saints behold us, would ye snivel for a word?" "Ye hurt me," sobbed Matcham. "Ye hurt me when ye threw me down. Y' are a coward to abuse your strength." "Nay, that is fool's talk," said Dick, roughly. "Y' had no title to my windac, Master John. I would have done right to have well basted you. If ye go with me, ye must obey me. And so, come." Matcham had half a thought to stay behind; but seeing that Dick continued to scour full tilt towards the eminence, and not so much as looked across his shoulder, he soon thought better of that, and began to run in turn. But the ground was very difficult and steep. Dick had already a long start, and had, at any rate, the lighter heels, and he had long since come to the summit, crawled forward through the firs, and ensconced himself in a thick tuft of gorse, before Matcham, panting like a deer, rejoined him, and lay down in silence by his side. Below, in the bottom of a considerable valley, the short cut from Tunstall hamlet wound downwards to the ferry. It was well beaten, and the eye followed it easily from point to point. Here it was bordered by open glades; there the forest closed upon it. Every 100 yards it ran beside an ambush. Far down the path the sun shone on 7 steel sallets, and from time to time, as the trees opened, Selden and his men could be seen riding briskly, still bent upon Sir Daniel's mission. The wind had somewhat fallen, but still trustled merrily with the trees, and perhaps, had Appleyard been there, he would have drawn a warning from the troubled conduct of the birds. "Now mark," Dick whispered. "They be already well advanced into the wood; their safety lieth rather in continuing forward. But see ye where this wide glade runneth down before us, and in the midst of it these 2 trees make like an island. There were their safety; an they but come sound as far as that, I will make shift to warn them. But my heart misgiveth me. They are but 7 against so many, and they but carry crossbows. The longbow jack will have the uppermost ever." Meanwhile, Selden and his men still wound up the path, ignorant of their danger, and momently drew nearer hand. Once, indeed, they paused, drew into a group, and seemed to point and listen. But it was something from far away across the plain that had arrested their attention, a hollow growl of cannon that came from time to time upon the wind, and told of the great battle. It was worth a thought, to be sure, for if the voice of the big guns would thus become audible in Tunstall Forest, the fight must have rolled ever eastward, and the day, by consequence, gone sore against Sir Daniel and the lords of the Dark Rose. But presently the little troop began again to move forward, and came next to a very open, heathy portion of the way, where but a single tongue of forest ran down to join the road. They were but just abreast of this when an arrow shone flying. One of the men threw up his arms, his horse reared, and both fell and struggled together in a mass. Even from where the boys lay, they could hear the rumour of the men's voices crying out. They could see the startled horses prancing, and presently, as the troop began to recover from their first surprise, one fellow beginning to dismount, a second arrow from somewhat farther off glanced in a wide arch. A second rider bit the dust. The man who was dismounting lost hold upon the rein, and his horse fled galloping, and dragged him by the foot along the road, bumping from stone to stone, and battered by the fleeing hoofs. The four who still kept the saddle instantly broke and scattered. One wheeled and rode, shrieking, towards the ferry. The other three, with loose rein and flying raiment, came galloping up the road from Tunstall. From every clump they passed an arrow sped. Soon a horse fell, but the rider found his feet, and continued to pursue his comrades, till a second shot dispatched him. Another man fell, then another horse. Out of the whole troop there was but one fellow left, and he on foot. Only, in different directions, the noise of the galloping of three riderless horses was dying fast into the distance. All this time not one of the assailants had for a moment shown himself. Here and there along the path horse or man rolled, undispatched in his agony, but no merciful enemy broke cover to put them from their pain. The solitary survivor stood bewildered in the road beside his fallen charger. He had come the length of that broad glade, with the island of timber pointed out by Dick. He was not, perhaps, 500 yards from where the boys lay hidden, and they could see him plainly, looking to and fro in deadly expectation. But nothing came, and the man began to pluck up his courage, and suddenly unslung and bent his bow. At the same time, by something in his action, Dick recognised Selden. At this offer of resistance, from all about him in the covert of the woods there went up the sound of laughter. A score of men at least, for this was the very thickest of the ambush, joined in this cruel and untimely mirth. Then an arrow glanced over Selden's shoulder, and he leaped and ran a little back. Another dart struck, quivering, at his heel. He made for the cover. A third shaft leaped out right in his face and fell short in front of him. And then the laughter was repeated loudly, rising and re-echoing from different thickets. It was plain that his assailants were but baiting him, as men in those days baited the poor bull, or as the cat still trifles with the mouse. The skirmish was well over. Farther down the road, a fellow in green was already calmly gathering the arrows, and now, in the evil pleasure of their hearts, they gave themselves the spectacle of their poor fellow sinner in his torture. Selden began to understand. He uttered a roar of anger, shouldered his crossbow, and sent a quarrel at a venture into the wood. Chance favoured him, for a slight cry responded. Then, throwing down his weapon, Selden began to run before him up the glade, and almost in a straight line for Dick and Matcham. The companions of the Black Arrow now began to shoot in earnest. But they were properly served. Their chance had passed. Most of them had now to shoot against the sun, and Selden, as he ran, bounded from side to side to baffle and deceive their aim. Best of all, by turning up the glade, he had defeated their preparations. There were no marksmen posted higher up than the one whom he had just killed or wounded, and the confusion of the foresters' counsels soon became apparent. A whistle sounded thrice, and then again twice. It was repeated from another quarter. The woods on either side became full of the sound of people bursting through the underwood, and a bewildered deer ran out into the open, stood for a second on 3 feet with nose in air, and then plunged again into the thicket. Selden still ran bounding. Ever and again an arrow followed him, but still would miss. It began to appear as if he might escape. Dick had his bow armed, ready to support him. Even Matcham, forgetful of his interest, took sides at heart for the poor fugitive, and both lads glowed and trembled in the ardour of their hearts. He was within 50 yards of them when an arrow struck him, and he fell. He was up again, indeed, upon the instant, but now he ran staggering, and, like a blind man, turned aside from his direction. Dick leaped to his feet and waved to him. "Here!" he cried. "This way! Here is help! Nay, run, fellow, run!" But just then a second arrow struck Selden in the shoulder, between the plates of his brigandine, and, piercing through his jack, brought him, like a stone, to earth. "Oh, the poor heart!" cried Matcham, with clasped hands. And Dick stood petrified upon the hill, a mark for archery. 10 to 1 he had speedily been shot, for the foresters were furious with themselves, and taken unawares by Dick's appearance in the rear of their position. But instantly, out of a quarter of the woods surprisingly near to the two lads, a stentorian voice arose, the voice of Ellis Duckworth. "Hold!" it roared. "Shoot not! Take him alive! It is young Shelton, Harry's son!" And immediately after, a shrill whistle sounded several times, and was again taken up and repeated farther off. The whistle, it appeared, was John Amend All's battle trumpet, by which he published his directions. "Ah, foul fortune!" cried Dick. "We are undone! Swiftly, Jack, come swiftly!" And the pair turned and ran back through the open pine clump that covered the summit of the hill. End of Book 1, Chapter 5. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Jeremy Pavier. The Black Arrow, A Tale of the Two Roses, by Robert Louis Stevenson. Book 1, Chapter 6. To the Day's End. It was indeed high time for them to run. On every side the company of the Black Arrow was making for the hill. Some, being better runners, or having open ground to run upon, had far outstripped the others, and were already close upon the goal. Some, following valleys, had spread out to right and left, and outflanked the lads on either side. Dick plunged into the nearest cover. It was a tall grove of oaks, firm underfoot and clear of underbrush, and as it lay downhill they made good speed. There followed next a piece of open, which Dick avoided, holding to his left. 2 minutes after, and the same obstacle arising, the lads followed the same course. Thus it followed that, while the lads, bending continually to the left, drew nearer and nearer to the high road and the river which they had crossed an hour or two before, the great bulk of their pursuers were leaning to the other hand and running towards Tunstall. The lads paused to breathe. There was no sound of pursuit. Dick put his ear to the ground, and still there was nothing. But the wind, to be sure, still made a turmoil in the trees, and it was hard to make certain. "On again!" said Dick, and, tired as they were, and Matcham limping with his injured foot, they pulled themselves together and once more pelted down the hill. 3 minutes later they were breasting through a low thicket of evergreen. High overhead the tall trees made a continuous roof of foliage. It was a pillared grove, as high as a cathedral, and, except for the hollies among which the lads were struggling, open and smoothly swarded. On the other side, pushing through the last fringe of evergreen, they blundered forth again into the open twilight of the grove. "Stand!" cried a voice. And there, between the huge stems, not 50 feet before them, they beheld a stout fellow in green, sore blown with running, who instantly drew an arrow to the head and covered them. Matcham stopped with a cry, but Dick, without a pause, ran straight upon the forester, drawing his dagger as he went. The other, whether he was startled by the daring of the onslaught, or whether he was hampered by his orders, did not shoot. He stood wavering, and before he had time to come to himself, Dick bounded at his throat and sent him sprawling backward on the turf. The arrow went one way and the bow another with a sounding twang. The disarmed forester grappled his assailant, but the dagger shone and descended twice. Then came a couple of groans, and then Dick rose to his feet again, and the man lay motionless, stabbed to the heart. "On!" said Dick, and he once more pelted forward, Matcham trailing in the rear. To say truth, they made but poor speed of it by now, labouring dismally as they ran, and catching for their breath like fish. Matcham had a cruel stitch, and his head swam; and as for Dick, his knees were like lead. But they kept up the form of running with undiminished courage. Presently they came to the end of the grove. It stopped abruptly, and there, a few yards before them, was the high road from Risingham to Shoreby, lying at this point between two even walls of forest. At the sight Dick paused, and as soon as he stopped running he became aware of a confused noise which rapidly grew louder. It was at first like the rush of a very high gust of wind, but soon it became more definite and resolved itself into the galloping of horses. And then, in a flash, a whole company of men-at-arms came driving round the corner, swept before the lads, and were gone again upon the instant. They rode as for their lives, in complete disorder. Some of them were wounded. Riderless horses galloped at their side with bloody saddles. They were plainly fugitives from the great battle. The noise of their passage had scarce begun to die away towards Shoreby before fresh hoofs came echoing in their wake, and another deserter clattered down the road, this time a single rider, and by his splendid armour a man of high degree. Close after him there followed several baggage waggons, fleeing at an ungainly canter, the drivers flailing at the horses as if for life. These must have run early in the day, but their cowardice was not to save them. For just before they came abreast of where the lads stood wondering, a man in hacked armour, and seemingly beside himself with fury, overtook the waggons, and with the truncheon of a sword began to cut the drivers down. Some leaped from their places and plunged into the wood. The others he sabred as they sat, cursing them the while for cowards in a voice that was scarce human. All this time the noise in the distance had continued to increase. The rumble of carts, the clatter of horses, the cries of men, a great confused rumour, came swelling on the wind, and it was plain that the rout of a whole army was pouring like an inundation down the road. Dick stood sombre. He had meant to follow the highway till the turn for Holywood, and now he had to change his plan. But above all he had recognised the colours of Earl Risingham, and he knew that the battle had gone finally against the Rose of Lancaster. Had Sir Daniel joined, and was he now a fugitive and ruined? Or had he deserted to the side of York, and was he forfeit to honour? It was an ugly choice. "Come," he said sternly, and turning on his heel, he began to walk forward through the grove, with Matcham limping in his rear. For some time they continued to thread the forest in silence. It was now growing late, the sun was setting in the plain beyond Ketley. The tree tops overhead glowed golden, but the shadows had begun to grow darker, and the chill of the night to fall. "If there was anything to eat!" cried Dick, suddenly pausing as he spoke. Matcham sat down and began to weep. "Ye can weep for your own supper, but when it was to save men's lives, your heart was hard enough," said Dick, contemptuously. "Y' have 7 deaths upon your conscience, Master John. I'll ne'er forgive you that." "Conscience!" cried Matcham, looking fiercely up. "Mine! And ye have the man's red blood upon your dagger? And wherefore did ye slay him, the poor soul? He drew his arrow, but he let not fly. He held you in his hand and spared you. 'Tis as brave to kill a kitten as a man that not defends himself." Dick was struck dumb. "I slew him fair. I ran me in upon his bow," he cried. "It was a cowardly blow," returned Matcham. "Y' are but a lout and a bully, Master Dick. Ye but abuse advantages. Let there come a stronger, we will see you truckle at his boot. Ye care not for vengeance neither, for your father's death that goes unpaid, and his poor ghost that clamoureth for justice. But if there come a poor creature in your hands that lacketh skill and strength, and would befriend you, down she shall go." Dick was too furious to observe that she. "Marry," he cried, "and here is news. Of any two, the one will still be stronger. The better man groweth the worse, and the worse is well served. Ye deserve a belting, Master Matcham, for your ill guidance and unthankfulness to meward. And what ye deserve ye shall have." And Dick, who even in his angriest temper still preserved the appearance of composure, began to unbuckle his belt. "Here shall be your supper," he said grimly. Matcham had stopped his tears. He was as white as a sheet, but he looked Dick steadily in the face and never moved. Dick took a step, swinging the belt. Then he paused, embarrassed by the large eyes and the thin, weary face of his companion. His courage began to subside. "Say ye were in the wrong, then," he said lamely. "Nay," said Matcham, "I was in the right. Come, crawl. I be lame, I be weary, I resist not. I ne'er did thee hurt. Come, beat me, coward." Dick raised the belt at this last provocation, but Matcham winced and drew himself together with so cruel an apprehension that his heart failed him yet again. The strap fell by his side, and he stood irresolute, feeling like a fool. "A plague upon thee, shrew," he said. "An ye be so feeble of hand, ye should keep the closer guard upon your tongue. But I'll be hanged before I beat you." Then he put on his belt again. "Beat you I will not," he continued, "but forgive you, never. I knew ye not. You my master's enemy. I lent you my horse. My dinner y' have eaten. Y' have called me a man of wood, a coward, and a bully. Nay, by the mass, the measure is filled and runneth over. 'Tis a great thing to be weak, I trow. Ye can do your worst, yet shall none punish you. Ye may steal a man's weapons in the hour of need, yet may the man not take his own again. Ye are weak, forsooth. Nay, then, if one cometh charging at you with a lance, and crieth he is weak, ye must let him pierce your body through. Tut, fool words!" "And yet ye beat me not," returned Matcham. "Let be," said Dick, "let be. I will instruct you. Ye have been ill nurtured, methinks, and yet ye have the makings of some good, and beyond all question saved me from the river. Nay, I had forgotten it. I am as thankless as thyself. But come, let us on. And we be for Holywood this night, ay, or to morrow early. We had best set forward speedily." But though Dick had talked himself back into his usual good humour, Matcham had forgiven him nothing. His violence, the recollection of the forester whom he had slain, above all, the vision of the upraised belt, were things not easily to be forgotten. "I will thank you, for the form's sake," said Matcham. "But in sooth, good Master Shelton, I had liever find my way alone. Here is a wide wood. Prithee, let each choose his path. I owe you a dinner and a lesson. Fare ye well." "Nay," cried Dick, "if that be your tune, so be it, and a plague be with you." Each turned aside, and they began walking off severally, with no thought of the direction, intent solely on their quarrel. But Dick had not gone 10 paces ere his name was called, and Matcham came running after. "Dick," he said, "it were unmannerly to part so coldly. Here is my hand, and my heart with it, for all that wherein you have so excellently served and helped me. Not for the form, but from the heart, I thank ye. Fare ye right well." "Well, lad," returned Dick, taking the hand which was offered him, "good speed to you, if speed you may. But I misdoubt it shrewdly. Y' are too disputatious." So then they separated for the second time, and presently it was Dick who was running after Matcham. "Here," he said, "take my crossbow. Shalt not go unarmed." "A crossbow?" said Matcham. "Nay, boy, I have neither the strength to bend, nor yet the skill to aim with it. It were no help to me, good boy. But yet I thank you." The night had now fallen, and under the trees they could no longer read each other's faces. "I will go some little way with you," said Dick. "The night is dark. I would fain leave you on a path, at least. My mind misgiveth me. Ye are likely to be lost." Without any more words, he began to walk forward, and the other once more followed him. The blackness grew thicker and thicker. Only here and there, in open places, they saw the sky dotted with small stars. In the distance, the noise of the rout of the Lancastrian army still continued to be faintly audible, but with every step they left it farther in the rear. At the end of half an hour of silent progress, they came forth upon a broad patch of heathy open. It glimmered in the light of the stars, shaggy with fern and islanded with clumps of yew, and here they paused and looked upon each other. "Y' are weary?" Dick said. "Nay, I am so weary," answered Matcham, "that methinks I could lie down and die." "I hear the chiding of a river," returned Dick. "Let us go far forth, for I am sore athirst." The ground sloped down gently, and sure enough, in the bottom they found a little murmuring river running among willows. Here they threw themselves down together by the brink, and putting their mouths to the level of a starry pool, they drank their fill. "Dick," said Matcham, "it may not be. I can no more." "I saw a pit as we came down," said Dick. "Let us lie down therein and sleep." "Nay, but with all my heart," cried Matcham. The pit was sandy and dry. A shock of brambles hung upon one hedge and made a partial shelter. And there the two lads lay down, keeping close together for the sake of warmth, their quarrel all forgotten. And soon sleep fell upon them like a cloud. and under the dew and stars they rested peacefully. End of Book 1, Chapter 6. Is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Jeremy Pavier. The Black Arrow, A Tale of the Two Roses, by Robert Louis Stevenson. Book 1, Chapter 7. The Hooded Face. They awoke in the grey of the morning. The birds were not yet in full song, but twittered here and there among the woods. The sun was not yet up, but the eastern sky was barred with solemn colours. Half starved and over-weary as they were, they lay without moving, sunk in a delightful lassitude. And as they thus lay, the clang of a bell fell suddenly upon their ears. "A bell!" said Dick, sitting up. "Can we be then so near to Holywood?" A little after, the bell clanged again, but this time somewhat nearer hand, and from that time forth, and still drawing nearer and nearer, it continued to sound brokenly abroad in the silence of the morning. "Nay, what should this betoken?" said Dick, who was now broad awake. "It is some one walking," returned Matcham, "and the bell tolleth ever as he moves." "I see that well," said Dick. "But wherefore? What maketh he in Tunstall woods? Jack," he added, "laugh at me an ye will, but I like not the hollow sound of it." "Nay," said Matcham, with a shiver, "it hath a doleful note. And the day were not come." But just then the bell, quickening its pace, began to ring thick and hurried, and then it gave a single hammering jangle and was silent for a space. "It is as though the bearer had run for a paternoster while, and then leaped the river," Dick observed. "And now beginneth he again to pace soberly forward," added Matcham. "Nay," returned Dick, "nay, not so soberly, Jack. 'Tis a man that walketh you right speedily. 'Tis a man in some fear of his life, or about some hurried business. See ye not how swift the beating draweth near?" "It is now close by," said Matcham. They were now on the edge of the pit, and as the pit itself was on a certain eminence, they commanded a view over the greater proportion of the clearing, up to the thick woods that closed it in. The daylight, which was very clear and grey, showed them a riband of white footpath wandering among the gorse. It passed some 100 yards from the pit, and ran the whole length of the clearing, east and west. By the line of its course, Dick judged it should lead more or less directly to the Moat House. Upon this path, stepping forth from the margin of the wood, a white figure now appeared. It paused a little and seemed to look about, and then, at a slow pace, and bent almost double, it began to draw near across the heath. At every step the bell clanked. Face it had none. A white hood, not even pierced with eye-holes, veiled the head, and as the creature moved, it seemed to feel its way with the tapping of a stick. Fear fell upon the lads, as cold as death. "A leper!" said Dick, hoarsely. "His touch is death," said Matcham. "Let us run." "Not so," returned Dick. "See ye not? He is stone blind. He guideth him with a staff. Let us lie still. The wind bloweth towards the path, and he will go by and hurt us not. Alas, poor soul, and we should rather pity him." "I will pity him when he is by," replied Matcham. The blind leper was now about half way towards them, and just then the sun rose and shone full on his veiled face. He had been a tall man before he was bowed by his disgusting sickness, and even now he walked with a vigorous step. The dismal beating of his bell, the pattering of the stick, the eyeless screen before his countenance, and the knowledge that he was not only doomed to death and suffering, but shut out for ever from the touch of his fellow men, filled the lads' bosoms with dismay. And at every step that brought him nearer, their courage and strength seemed to desert them. As he came about level with the pit, he paused, and turned his face full upon the lads. "Mary be my shield! He sees us!" said Matcham faintly. "Hush!" whispered Dick. "He doth but hearken. He is blind, fool." The leper looked or listened, whichever he was really doing, for some seconds. Then he began to move on again, but presently paused once more, and again turned and seemed to gaze upon the lads. Even Dick became dead white, and closed his eyes, as if by the mere sight he might become infected. But soon the bell sounded, and this time, without any farther hesitation, the leper crossed the remainder of the little heath and disappeared into the cover of the woods. "He saw us," said Matcham. "I could swear it." "Tut," returned Dick, recovering some sparks of courage. "He but heard us. He was in fear, poor soul. And you were blind and walked in a perpetual night, ye would start yourself, if ever a twig rustled or a bird cried peep." "Dick, good Dick, he saw us," repeated Matcham. "When a man hearkeneth, he doth not as this man, he doth otherwise, Dick. This was seeing, it was not hearing. He means foully. Hark! Else if his bell be not stopped." Such was the case. The bell rang no longer. "Nay," said Dick, "I like not that. Nay," he cried again, "I like that little. What may this betoken? Let us go, by the mass." "He hath gone east," added Matcham. "Good Dick, let us go westward straight. I shall not breathe till I have my back turned upon that leper." "Jack, y' are too cowardly," replied Dick. "We shall go fair for Holywood, or as fair at least as I can guide you, and that will be due north." They were afoot at once, passed the stream upon some stepping stones, and began to mount on the other side, which was steeper, towards the margin of the wood. The ground became very uneven, full of knolls and hollows. Trees grew scattered or in clumps. It became difficult to choose a path, and the lads somewhat wandered. They were weary, besides, with yesterday's exertions and the lack of food, and they moved but heavily and dragged their feet among the sand. Presently, coming to the top of a knoll, they were aware of the leper, some 100 feet in front of them, crossing the line of their march by a hollow. His bell was silent, his staff no longer tapped the ground, and he went before them with the swift and assured footsteps of a man who sees. Next moment he had disappeared into a little thicket. The lads, at the first glimpse, had crouched behind a tuft of gorse. There they lay, horror struck. "Certain he pursueth us," said Dick. "Certain. He held the clapper of his bell in one hand. Saw ye? That it should not sound. Now may the saints aid and guide us, for I have no strength to combat pestilence." "What maketh he?" cried Matcham. "What doth he want? Who ever heard the like, that a leper out of mere malice should pursue unfortunates? Hath he not his bell to that very end, that people may avoid him? Dick, there is below this something deeper." "Nay, I care not," moaned Dick. "The strength is gone out of me. My legs are like water. The saints be mine assistants." "Would ye lie there idle?" cried Matcham. "Let us back into the open. We have the better chance. He cannot steal upon us unawares." "Not I," cried Dick. "My time is come, and peradventure he may pass us by." "Bend me then your bow," cried the other. "What, will ye be a man?" Dick crossed himself. "Would ye have me shoot upon a leper?" he cried. "The hand would fail me. Nay, now," he added. "Nay, now, let be. With sound men I will fight, but not with ghosts and lepers. Which this is I wot not. One or other, heaven be our protection." "Now," said Matcham, "if this be man's courage, what a poor thing is man! But sith ye will do naught, let us lie close." Then came a single, broken jangle on the bell. "He hath missed his hold upon the clapper," whispered Matcham. "Saints, how near he is!" But Dick answered never a word. His teeth were near chattering. Soon they saw a piece of the white robe between some bushes. Then the leper's head was thrust forth from behind a trunk, and he seemed narrowly to scan the neighbourhood before he once again withdrew. To their stretched senses, the whole bush appeared alive with rustlings and the creak of twigs, and they heard the beating of each other's heart. Suddenly, with a cry, the leper sprang into the open close by and ran straight upon the lads. They, shrieking aloud, separated, began to run different ways. But their horrible enemy fastened upon Matcham, ran him swiftly down, and had him almost instantly a prisoner. The lad gave one scream that echoed high and far over the forest. He had one spasm of struggling, and then all his limbs relaxed, and he fell limp into his captor's arms. Dick heard the cry and turned. He saw Matcham fall, and on the instant his spirit and his strength revived. With a cry of pity and anger, he unslung and bent his arblast. but ere he had time to shoot, the leper held up his hand. "Hold your shot, Dickon," cried a familiar voice. "Hold your shot, mad wag. Know ye not a friend?" And then, laying down Matcham on the turf, he undid the hood from off his face and disclosed the features of Sir Daniel Brackley. "Sir Daniel!" cried Dick. "Ay, by the mass, Sir Daniel," returned the knight. "Would ye shoot upon your guardian, rogue? But here is this." And there he broke off, and pointing to Matcham, asked, "How call ye him, Dick?" "Nay," said Dick, "I call him Master Matcham. Know ye him not? He said ye knew him." "Ay," replied Sir Daniel, "I know the lad," and he chuckled. "But he has fainted, and by my sooth, he might have had less to faint for. Hey, Dick, did I put the fear of death upon you?" "Indeed, Sir Daniel, ye did that," said Dick, and sighed again at the mere recollection. "Nay, sir, saving your respect, I had as lief have met the devil in person, and to speak the truth, I am yet all a quake. And what made ye, sir, in such a guise?" Sir Daniel's brow grew suddenly black with anger. "What made I?" he said. "Ye do well to mind me of it. What! I skulked for my poor life in my own wood of Tunstall, Dick. We were ill sped at the battle. We but got there to be swept among the rout. Where be all my good men at arms? Dick, by the mass, I know not. We were swept down. The shot fell thick among us. I have not seen one man in my own colours since I saw three fall. For myself, I came sound to Shoreby, and being mindful of the Black Arrow, got me this gown and bell, and came softly by the path for the moat house. There is no disguise to be compared with it. The jingle of this bell would scare me the stoutest outlaw in the forest. They would all turn pale to hear it. At length I came by you and Matcham. I could see but evilly through this same hood, and was not sure of you, being chiefly, and for many a good cause, astonished at the finding you together. Moreover, in the open, where I had to go slowly and tap with my staff, I feared to disclose myself. But see," he added, "this poor shrew begins a little to revive. A little good canary will comfort me the heart of it." The knight, from under his long dress, produced a stout bottle, and began to rub the temples and wet the lips of the patient, who returned gradually to consciousness, and began to roll dim eyes from one to another. "What cheer, Jack?" said Dick. "It was no leper after all. It was Sir Daniel, see?" "Swallow me a good draught of this," said the knight. "This will give you manhood. Thereafter I will give you both a meal, and we shall all three on to Tunstall. For, Dick," he continued, laying forth bread and meat upon the grass, "I will avow to you in all good conscience, it irks me sorely to be safe between four walls. Not since I backed a horse have I been pressed so hard. Peril of life, jeopardy of land and livelihood, and to sum up, all these losels in the wood to hunt me down. But I be not yet shent. Some of my lads will pick me their way home. Hatch hath 10 fellows. Selden he had 6. Nay, we shall soon be strong again. And if I can but buy my peace with my right fortunate and undeserving Lord of York, why, Dick, we'll be a man again and go a horseback." And so saying, the knight filled himself a horn of canary and pledged his ward in dumb show. "Selden," Dick faltered. "Selden," and he paused again. Sir Daniel put down the wine untasted. "How?" he cried, in a changed voice. "Selden! Speak! What of Selden?" Dick stammered forth the tale of the ambush and the massacre. The knight heard in silence, but as he listened, his countenance became convulsed with rage and grief. "Now hear," he cried, "on my right hand I swear to avenge it. If that I fail, if that I spill not 10 men's souls for each, may this hand wither from my body. I broke this Duckworth like a rush. I beggared him to his door. I burned the thatch above his head. I drove him from this country. And now cometh he back to beard me. Nay, but Duckworth, this time it shall go bitter hard." He was silent for some time, his face working. "Eat!" he cried suddenly. "And you here," he added to Matcham, "swear me an oath to follow straight to the moat house." "I will pledge mine honour," replied Matcham. "What make I with your honour?" cried the knight. "Swear me upon your mother's welfare." Matcham gave the required oath, and Sir Daniel readjusted the hood over his face and prepared his bell and staff. To see him once more in that appalling travesty somewhat revived the horror of his two companions, but the knight was soon upon his feet. "Eat with dispatch," he said, "and follow me yarely to mine house." And with that he set forth again into the woods, and presently after the bell began to sound, numbering his steps, and the two lads sat by their untasted meal, and heard it die slowly away up into the distance. "And so ye go to Tunstall?" Dick inquired. "Yea, verily," said Matcham, "when needs must. I am braver behind Sir Daniel's back than to his face." They ate hastily, and set forth along the path through the airy upper levels of the forest, where great beeches stood apart among green lawns, and the birds and squirrels made merry on the boughs. 2 hours later they began to descend upon the other side, and already, among the tree tops, saw before them the red walls and roofs of Tunstall House. "Here," said Matcham, pausing, "ye shall take your leave of your friend Jack, whom ye are to see no more. Come, Dick, forgive him what he did amiss, as he, for his part, cheerfully and lovingly forgiveth you." "And wherefore so?" asked Dick. "An we both go to Tunstall, I shall see you yet again, I trow, and that right often." "Ye'll never see again poor Jack Matcham," replied the other, "that was so fearful and burthensome, and yet plucked you from the river. Ye'll not see him more, Dick, by mine honour." He held his arms open, and the lads embraced and kissed. "And, Dick," continued Matcham, "my spirit bodeth ill. Ye are now to see anew Sir Daniel. For heretofore hath all prospered in his hands exceedingly, and fortune followed him. But now, methinks, when his fate hath come upon him, and he runs the adventure of his life, he will prove but a foul lord to both of us. He may be brave in battle, but he hath the liar's eye. There is fear in his eye, Dick, and fear is as cruel as the wolf. We go down into that house. St. Mary guide us forth again." And so they continued their descent in silence, and came out at last before Sir Daniel's forest stronghold, where it stood, low and shady, flanked with round towers, and stained with moss and lichen in the lilied waters of the moat. Even as they appeared, the doors were opened, the bridge lowered, and Sir Daniel himself, with Hatch and the parson at his side, stood ready to receive them. End of Book 1, Chapter 7. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Jeremy Pavier. The Black Arrow, A Tale of the Two Roses, by Robert Louis Stevenson. Book 2, The Moat House. Chapter 1, Dick Asks Questions. The Moat House stood not far from the rough forest road. Externally, it was a compact rectangle of red stone, flanked at each corner by a round tower, pierced for archery, and battlemented at the top. Within, it enclosed a narrow court. The moat was perhaps 12 feet wide, crossed by a single drawbridge. It was supplied with water by a trench leading to a forest pool, and commanded through its whole length from the battlements of the two southern towers. Except that one or two tall and thick trees had been suffered to remain within half a bowshot of the walls, the house was in a good posture for defence. In the court, Dick found a part of the garrison, busy with preparations for defence, and gloomily discussing the chances of a siege. Some were making arrows, some sharpening swords that had long been disused. But even as they worked, they shook their heads. 12 of Sir Daniel's party had escaped the battle, run the gauntlet through the wood, and come alive to the moat house. But out of this dozen, 3 had been gravely wounded, 2 at Risingham in the disorder of the rout, 1 by John Amend All's marksman as he crossed the forest. This raised the force of the garrison, counting Hatch, Sir Daniel, and young Shelton, to 22 effective men, and more might be continually expected to arrive. The danger lay not, therefore, in the lack of men. It was the terror of the Black Arrow that oppressed the spirits of the garrison. For their open foes of the party of York, in these most changing times, they felt but a far-away concern. The world, as people said in those days, might change again before harm came. But for their neighbours in the wood, they trembled. It was not Sir Daniel alone who was a mark for hatred. His men, conscious of impunity, had carried themselves cruelly through all the country. harsh commands had been harshly executed, and of the little band that now sat talking in the court, there was not one but had been guilty of some act of oppression or barbarity. And now, by the fortune of war, Sir Daniel had become powerless to protect his instruments. Now, by the issue of some hours of battle, at which many of them had not been present, they had all become punishable traitors to the state, outside the buckler of the law, a shrunken company in a poor fortress that was hardly tenable, and exposed upon all sides to the just resentment of their victims. Nor had there been lacking grisly advertisements of what they might expect. At different periods of the evening and the night, no fewer than 7 riderless horses had come neighing in terror to the gate. 2 were from Selden's troop. 5 belonged to men who had ridden with Sir Daniel to the field. Lastly, a little before dawn, a spearman had come staggering to the moat side, pierced by 3 arrows. Even as they carried him in, his spirit had departed, but by the words that he uttered in his agony, he must have been the last survivor of a considerable company of men. Hatch himself showed, under his sun brown, the pallor of anxiety, and when he had taken Dick aside and learned the fate of Selden, he fell on a stone bench and fairly wept. The others, from where they sat on stools or doorsteps in the sunny angle of the court, looked at him with wonder and alarm, but none ventured to inquire the cause of his emotion. "Nay, Master Shelton," said Hatch at last. "Nay, but what said I? We shall all go. Selden was a man of his hands, he was like a brother to me. Well, he has gone second. Well, we shall all follow. For what said their knave rhyme? A black arrow in each black heart. Was it not so it went? Appleyard, Selden, Smith, old Humphrey gone, and there lieth poor John Carter, crying, poor sinner, for the priest." Dick gave ear. Out of a low window, hard by where they were talking, groans and murmurs came to his ear. "Lieth he there?" he asked. "Ay, in the second porter's chamber," answered Hatch. "We could not bear him further, soul and body were so bitterly at odds. At every step we lifted him, he thought to wend. But now, methinks, it is the soul that suffereth. Ever for the priest he crieth, and Sir Oliver, I wot not why, still cometh not. 'Twill be a long shrift. But poor Appleyard and poor Selden, they had none." Dick stooped to the window and looked in. The little cell was low and dark, but he could make out the wounded soldier lying moaning on his pallet. "Carter, poor friend, how goeth it?" he asked. "Master Shelton," returned the man in an excited whisper, "for the dear light of heaven, bring the priest. Alack, I am sped. I am brought very low down. My hurt is to the death. Ye may do me no more service. This shall be the last. Now, for my poor soul's interest, and as a loyal gentleman, bestir you, for I have that matter on my conscience that shall drag me deep." He groaned, and Dick heard the grating of his teeth, whether in pain or terror. Just then Sir Daniel appeared upon the threshold of the hall. He had a letter in one hand. "Lads," he said, "we have had a shog, we have had a tumble. Wherefore then deny it? Rather, it imputeth to get speedily again to saddle. This old Harry the Sixt has had the undermost. Wash we then our hands of him. I have a good friend that rideth next the Duke, the Lord of Wensleydale. Well, I have writ a letter to my friend, praying his good lordship, and offering large satisfaction for the past, and reasonable surety for the future. Doubt not but he will lend a favourable ear. A prayer without gifts is like a song without music. I surfeit him with promises, boys. I spare not to promise. What then is lacking? Nay, a great thing. Wherefore should I deceive you? A great thing and a difficult. A messenger to bear it. The woods, ye are not ignorant of that, lie thick with our ill willers. Haste is most needful, but without sleight and caution all is naught. Which then of this company will take me this letter, bear me it to my Lord of Wensleydale, and bring me back the answer?" One man instantly rose. "I will, and like you," said he. "I will even risk my carcase." "Nay, Dicky Bowyer, not so," returned the knight. "It likes me not. Y' are sly indeed, but not speedy. You were a laggard ever." "And be so, Sir Daniel, here am I," cried another. "The saints forfend," said the knight. "Y' are speedy, but not sly. Ye would blunder me head foremost into John Amend All's camp. I thank you both for your good courage, but in sooth it may not be." Then Hatch offered himself, and he was also refused. "I want you here, good Bennet. Y' are my right hand indeed," returned the knight. And then several coming forward in a group, Sir Daniel at length selected one and gave him the letter. "Now," he said, "upon your good speed and better discretion we do all depend. Bring me a good answer back, and before 3 weeks I will have purged my forest of these vagabonds that brave us to our faces. But mark it well, Throgmorton, the matter is not easy. Ye must steal forth under night and go like a fox. And how ye are to cross Till I know not, neither by the bridge nor ferry." "I can swim," returned Throgmorton. "I will come soundly, fear not." "Well, friend, get ye to the buttery," replied Sir Daniel. "Ye shall swim first of all in nut brown ale." And with that he turned back into the hall. "Sir Daniel hath a wise tongue," said Hatch aside to Dick. "See now, where many a lesser man had glossed the matter over, he speaketh it out plainly to his company. Here is a danger, I saith, and here difficulty, and jesteth in the very saying. Nay, by St. Barbary, he is a born captain. Not a man, but he is some deal heartened up. See how they fall again to work." This praise of Sir Daniel put a thought in the lad's head. "Bennet," he said, "how came my father by his end?" "Ask me not that," replied Hatch. "I had no hand nor knowledge in it. Furthermore, I will even be silent, Master Dick. For look you, in a man's own business there he may speak, but of hearsay matters and of common talk, not so. Ask me Sir Oliver, or Carter, if ye will, not me." And Hatch set off to make the rounds, leaving Dick in a muse. "Wherefore would he not tell me?" thought the lad. "And wherefore named he Carter? Carter? Nay, then Carter had a hand in it, perchance?" He entered the house, and passing some little way along a flagged and vaulted passage, came to the door of a cell where the hurt man lay groaning. At his entrance, Carter started eagerly. "Have ye brought the priest?" he cried. "Not yet awhile," returned Dick. "Ye have a word to tell me first. How came my father, Harry Shelton, by his death?" The man's face altered instantly. "I know not," he replied doggedly. "Nay, ye know well," returned Dick. "Seek not to put me by." "I tell you I know not," repeated Carter. "Then," said Dick, "ye shall die unshriven. Here am I, and here shall stay. There shall be no priest come near you, rest assured. For of what avail is penitence, an ye have no mind to right those wrongs ye had a hand in? And without penitence, confession is but mockery." "Ye say what ye mean not, Master Dick," said Carter, composedly. "It is ill threatening the dying, and becometh you to speak truth little. And for as little as it commends you, it shall serve you less. Stay, an ye please. Ye will condemn my soul. Ye shall learn nothing. There is my last word to you." And the wounded man turned upon the other side. Now Dick, to say truth, had spoken hastily, and was ashamed of his threat. But he made one more effort. "Carter," he said, "mistake me not. I know ye were but an instrument in the hands of others. A churl must obey his lord. I would not bear heavily on such an one. But I begin to learn upon many sides that this great duty lieth on my youth and ignorance, to avenge my father. Prithee, then, good Carter, set aside the memory of my threatenings, and in pure goodwill and honest penitence, give me a word of help." The wounded man lay silent, nor, say what Dick pleased, could he extract another word from him. "Well," said Dick, "I will go and call the priest to you, as ye desired. For howsoever ye be in fault to me or mine, I would not be willingly in fault to any, least of all to one upon the last change." Again the old soldier heard him without speech or motion. Even his groans he had suppressed, and as Dick turned and left the room, he was filled with admiration for that rugged fortitude. And yet, he thought, of what use is courage without wit? Had his hands been clean, he would have spoken. His silence did confess the secret louder than words. Nay, upon all sides proof floweth on me. Sir Daniel, he or his men, hath done this thing. Dick paused in the stone passage with a heavy heart. At that hour, in the ebb of Sir Daniel's fortune, when he was beleaguered by the archers of the Black Arrow and proscribed by the victorious Yorkists, was Dick also to turn upon the man who had nourished and taught him, who had severely punished, indeed, but yet unwearingly protected his youth? The necessity, if it should prove to be one, was cruel. "Pray Heaven he be innocent," he said. And then steps sounded on the flagging, and Sir Oliver came gravely towards the lad. "One seeketh you earnestly," said Dick. "I am upon the way, good Richard," said the priest. "It is this poor carter. Alack, he is beyond cure." "And yet his soul is sicker than his body," answered Dick. "Have ye seen him?" asked Sir Oliver, with a manifest start. "I do but come from him," replied Dick. "What said he? What said he?" snapped the priest, with extraordinary eagerness. "He but cried for you the more piteously, Sir Oliver. It were well done to go the faster, for his hurt is grievous," returned the lad. "I am straight for him," was the reply. "Well, we have all our sins. We must all come to our latter day, good Richard." "Ay, sir, and it were well if we all came fairly," answered Dick. The priest dropped his eyes, and with an inaudible benediction hurried on. "He, too," thought Dick, "he that taught me in piety. Nay, then, what a world is this, if all that care for me be blood guilty of my father's death? Vengeance! Alas, what a sore fate is mine, if I must be avenged upon my friends!" The thought put Matcham in his head. He smiled at the remembrance of his strange companion, and then wondered where he was. Ever since they had come together to the doors of the Moat House, the younger lad had disappeared, and Dick began to weary for a word with him. About an hour after, mass being somewhat hastily run through by Sir Oliver, the company gathered in the hall for dinner. It was a long, low apartment, strewn with green rushes, and the walls hung with arras in a design of savage men and questing bloodhounds. Here and there hung spears and bows and bucklers. A fire blazed in the big chimney. There were arras-covered benches round the wall, and in the midst of the table, fairly spread, awaited the arrival of the diners. Neither Sir Daniel nor his lady made their appearance. Sir Oliver himself was absent, and here again there was no word of Matcham. Dick began to grow alarmed, to recall his companion's melancholy forebodings, and to wonder to himself if any foul play had befallen him in that house. After dinner he found Goody Hatch, who was hurrying to my Lady Brackley. "Goody," he said, "where is Master Matcham, I prithee? I saw ye go in with him when we arrived." The old woman laughed aloud. "Ha, Master Dick," she said, "y' have a famous bright eye in your head, to be sure," and laughed again. "Nay, but where is he, indeed?" persisted Dick. "Ye will never see him more," she returned. "Never, 'tis sure." "And I do not," returned the lad. "I will know the reason why. He came not hither of his full free will. Such as I am his best protector, and I will see him justly used. There be too many mysteries. I do begin to weary of the game." But as Dick was speaking, a heavy hand fell on his shoulder. It was Bennet Hatch that had come unperceived behind him. With a jerk of his thumb, the retainer dismissed his wife. "Friend Dick," he said, as soon as they were alone, "are ye a moonstruck natural? An ye leave not certain things in peace, ye were better in the salt sea than here in Tunstall Moat House. Ye have questioned me, ye have baited Carter, ye have frightened the Jack Priest with hints. Bear ye more wisely, fool. And even now, when Sir Daniel calleth you, show me a smooth face for the love of wisdom. Ye are to be sharply questioned. Look to your answers." "Hatch," returned Dick, "in all this I smell a guilty conscience." "An ye go not the wiser, ye will soon smell blood," replied Bennet. "I do but warn you. And here cometh one to call you." And indeed, at that very moment, a messenger came across the court to summon Dick into the presence of Sir Daniel. End of Book 2, Chapter 1. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Jeremy Pavier. The Black Arrow, A Tale of the Two Roses, by Robert Louis Stevenson. Book 2, Chapter 2, The Two Oaths. Sir Daniel was in the hall. There he paced angrily before the fire, awaiting Dick's arrival. None was by except Sir Oliver, and he sat discreetly backward, thumbing and muttering over his breviary. "Y' have sent for me, Sir Daniel?" said young Shelton. "I have sent for you, indeed," replied the knight. "For what cometh to mine ears? Have I been to you so heavy a guardian that ye make haste to credit ill of me? Or sith that ye see me for the nonce some worsted, do ye think to quit my party? By the mass, your father was not so. Those he was near, those he stood by, come wind or weather. But you, Dick, ye are a fair day friend, it seemeth, and now seek to clear yourself of your allegiance. "And please you, Sir Daniel, not so," returned Dick, firmly. "I am grateful and faithful, where gratitude and faith are due. And before more is said, I thank you, and I thank Sir Oliver. Ye have great claims upon me both. None can have more. I were a hound if I forgot them." "It is well," said Sir Daniel. And then, rising into anger, "Gratitude and faith are words, Dick Shelton," he continued, "but I look to deeds. In this hour of my peril, when my name is attainted, when my lands are forfeit, when this wood is full of men that hunger and thirst for my destruction, what doth gratitude? What doth faith? I have but a little company remaining. Is it grateful or faithful to poison me their hearts with your insidious whisperings? Save me from such gratitude. But come now, what is it ye wish? Speak. We are here to answer. If ye have aught against me, stand forth and say it." "Sir," replied Dick, "my father fell when I was yet a child. It hath come to mine ears that he was foully done by. It hath come to mine ears, for I will not dissemble, that ye had a hand in his undoing. And in all verity, I shall not be at peace in mine own mind, nor very clear to help you, till I have certain resolution of these doubts." Sir Daniel sat down in a deep settle. He took his chin in his hand and looked at Dick fixedly. "And ye think I would be guardian to the man's son that I had murdered?" he asked. "Nay," said Dick. "Pardon me if I answer churlishly, but indeed ye know right well a wardship is most profitable. All these years have ye not enjoyed my revenues and led my men? Have ye not still my marriage? I wot not what it may be worth. It is worth something. Pardon me again, but if ye were base enough to slay a man under trust, here were perhaps reasons enough to move you to the lesser baseness." "When I was a lad of your years," returned Sir Daniel, sternly, "my mind had not so turned upon suspicions. And Sir Oliver here," he added, "why should he, a priest, be guilty of this act?" "Nay, Sir Daniel," said Dick, "but where the master biddeth, there will the dog go. It is well known this priest is but your instrument. I speak very freely. The time is not for courtesies. Even as I speak, so would I be answered, and answer get I none. Ye but put more questions. I rede ye beware, Sir Daniel, for in this way ye will but nourish and not satisfy my doubts." "I will answer you fairly, Master Richard," said the knight. "Were I to pretend ye have not stirred my wrath, I were no honest man. But I will be just even in anger. Come to me with these words when ye are grown, and come to man's estate, and I am no longer your guardian, and so helpless to resent them. Come to me then, and I will answer you as ye merit, with a buffet in the mouth. Till then ye have two courses. Either swallow me down these insults, keep a silent tongue, and fight in the meanwhile for the man that fed and fought for your infancy. Or else the door standeth open, the woods are full of mine enemies. Go." The spirit with which these words were uttered, the looks with which they were accompanied, staggered Dick. And yet he could not but observe that he had got no answer. "I desire nothing more earnestly, Sir Daniel, than to believe you," he replied. "Assure me ye are free from this." "Will ye take my word of honour, Dick?" inquired the knight. "That would I," answered the lad. "I give it you," returned Sir Daniel, "upon my word of honour, upon the eternal welfare of my spirit, and, as I shall answer for my deeds hereafter, I had no hand nor portion in your father's death." He extended his hand, and Dick took it eagerly. Neither of them observed the priest, who, at the pronunciation of that solemn and false oath, had half arisen from his seat in an agony of horror and remorse. "Ah!" cried Dick, "ye must find it in your great heartedness to pardon me. I was a churl indeed to doubt of you. But ye have my hand upon it, I will doubt no more." "Nay, Dick," replied Sir Daniel, "y' are forgiven. Ye know not the world and its calumnious nature. I was the more to blame," added Dick, "in that rogues pointed, not directly at yourself, but at Sir Oliver." As he spoke, he turned towards the priest, and paused in the middle of the last word. This tall, ruddy, corpulent, high stepping man had fallen, you might say, to pieces. His colour was gone, his limbs were relaxed, his lips stammered prayers, and now, when Dick's eyes were fixed upon him suddenly, he cried out aloud like some wild animal, and buried his face in his hands. Sir Daniel was by him in two strides, and shook him fiercely by the shoulder. At the same moment Dick's suspicions reawakened. Nay, he said, Sir Oliver may swear also. 'Twas him they accused. He shall swear, said the knight. Sir Oliver speechlessly waved his arms. Ay, by the mass, but ye shall swear, cried Sir Daniel, beside himself with fury. Here, upon this book, ye shall swear, he continued, picking up the breviary, which had fallen to the ground. What, ye make me doubt you? Swear, I say, swear! But the priest was still incapable of speech. His terror of Sir Daniel, his terror of perjury, risen to about an equal height, strangled him. And just then, through the high stained-glass window of the hall, a black arrow crashed and struck, and stuck quivering in the midst of the long table. Sir Oliver, with a loud scream, fell fainting on the rushes, while the knight, followed by Dick, dashed into the court and up the nearest corkscrew stair to the battlements. The sentries were all on the alert. The sun shone quietly on green lawns dotted with trees, and on the wooded hills of the forest which enclosed the view. There was no sign of a besieger. Whence came that shot? asked the knight. From yonder clump, Sir Daniel, returned a sentinel. The knight stood a little, musing. Then he turned to Dick. Dick, he said, keep me an eye upon these men. I leave you in charge here. As for the priest, he shall clear himself, or I will know the reason why. I do almost begin to share in your suspicions. He shall swear, trust me, or we shall prove him guilty. Dick answered somewhat coldly, and the knight, giving him a piercing glance, hurriedly returned to the hall. His first glance was for the arrow. It was the first of these missiles he had seen, and as he turned it to and fro, the dark hue of it touched him with some fear. Again there was some writing. One word. Earthed. Ay, he broke out, they know I am home, then. Earthed, ay, but there is not a dog among them fit to dig me out. Sir Oliver had come to himself, and now scrambled to his feet. Alack, Sir Daniel, he moaned, ye have sworn a dread oath. Ye are doomed to the end of time. Ay, returned the knight, I have sworn an oath indeed, thou chucklehead. But thyself shall swear a greater. It shall be on the blessed cross of Holywood. Look to it, get the words ready. It shall be sworn to-night. Now, may heaven lighten you, replied the priest. May heaven incline your heart from this iniquity. Look you, my good father, said Sir Daniel, if ye are for piety, I say no more. Ye begin late, that is all. But if ye are in any sense bent upon wisdom, hear me. This lad beginneth to irk me like a wasp. I have need for him, for I would sell his marriage. But I tell you in all plainness, if that he continue to weary me, he shall go join his father. I give orders now to change him to the chamber above the chapel. If that ye can swear your innocency with a good solid oath and an assured countenance, it is well. The lad will be at peace a little, and I will spare him. If that ye stammer or blench, or anyways boggle at swearing, he will not believe you, and by the mass he shall die. There is for your thinking on. The chamber above the chapel? gasped the priest. That same, replied the knight. So if ye desire to save him, save him. And if ye desire not, prithee go to, and let me be at peace. For an I had been a hasty man, I would already have put my sword through you for your intolerable cowardice and folly. Have ye chosen? Say. I have chosen, said the priest. Heaven pardon me. I will do evil for good. I will swear for the lad's sake. So is it best, said Sir Daniel. Send for him, then, speedily. Ye shall see him alone. Yet I shall have an eye on you. I shall be here, in the panel room. The knight raised the arras and let it fall again behind him. There was the sound of a spring opening. Then followed the creaking of trod stairs. Sir Oliver, left alone, cast a timorous glance upward at the arras-covered wall, and crossed himself with every appearance of terror and contrition. Nay, if he is in the chapel room, the priest murmured, were it at my soul's cost, I must save him. 3 minutes later, Dick, who had been summoned by another messenger, found Sir Oliver standing by the hall table, resolute and pale. Richard Shelton, he said, ye have required an oath from me. I might complain, I might deny you, but my heart is moved toward you for the past, and I will even content you as ye choose. By the true cross of Holywood, I did not slay your father. Sir Oliver, returned Dick, When first we read John Amendol's paper, I was convinced of so much. But suffer me to put 2 questions. Ye did not slay him, granted. But had ye no hand in it? None, said Sir Oliver, and at the same time he began to contort his face and signal with his mouth and eyebrows, like one who desired to convey a warning, yet dared not utter a sound. Dick regarded him in wonder. Then he turned and looked all about him at the empty hall. "What make ye?" he inquired. "Why, naught," returned the priest, hastily smoothing his countenance. "I make naught. I do but suffer. I am sick. Prithee, Dick, I must be gone. On the true cross of Holywood, I am clean innocent alike of violence or treachery. Content ye, good lad. Farewell." And he made his escape from the apartment with unusual alacrity. Dick remained rooted to the spot, his eyes wandering about the room, his face a changing picture of various emotions wonder, doubt, suspicion, and amusement. Gradually, as his mind grew clearer, suspicion took the upper hand, and was succeeded by certainty of the worst. He raised his head, and, as he did so, violently started. High upon the wall there was the figure of a savage hunter woven in the tapestry. With one hand he held a horn to his mouth, in the other he brandished a stout spear. His face was dark, for he was meant to represent an African. Now, here was what had startled Richard Shelton. The sun had moved away from the hall windows, and at the same time the fire had blazed up high on the wide hearth and shed a changeful glow upon the roof and hangings. In this light the figure of the black hunter had winked at him with a white eyelid. He continued staring at the eye. The light shone upon it like a gem. It was liquid, it was alive. Again the white eyelid closed upon it for a fraction of a second, and the next moment it was gone. There could be no mistake. The live eye that had been watching him through a hole in the tapestry was gone. The firelight no longer shone on a reflecting surface. And instantly Dick awoke to the terrors of his position. Hatch's warning, the mute signals of the priest, this eye that had observed him from the wall, ran together in his mind. He saw he had been put upon his trial, that he had once more betrayed his suspicions, and that, short of some miracle, he was lost. If I cannot get me forth out of this house, he thought, I am a dead man, and this poor Matcham too. To what a cockatrice's nest have I not led him? He was still so thinking when there came one in haste to bid him help in changing his arms, his clothing, and his 2 or 3 books to a new chamber. "A new chamber?" he repeated. "Wherefore so? What chamber?" "'Tis one above the chapel," answered the messenger. "It hath stood long empty," said Dick, musing. "What manner of room is it?" "Nay, a brave room," returned the man. "But yet," lowering his voice, "they call it haunted." "Haunted?" repeated Dick, with a chill. "I have not heard of it. Nay, then, and by whom?" The messenger looked about him, and then, in a low whisper, "By the sacrist of St. John's," he said. "They had him there to sleep one night, and in the morning, whew, he was gone. The devil had taken him, they said. The more betoken he had drunk late the night before." Dick followed the man with black forebodings. End of Book 2, Chapter 2. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Jeremy Pavier. The Black Arrow, A Tale of the Two Roses, by Robert Louis Stevenson. Book 2, Chapter 3. The Room over the Chapel. From the battlements nothing further was observed. The sun journeyed westward, and at last went down. But, to the eyes of all these eager sentinels, no living thing appeared in the neighbourhood of Tunstall House. When the night was at length fairly come, Throgmorton was led to a room overlooking an angle of the moat. Thence he was lowered with every precaution. The ripple of his swimming was audible for a brief period. Then a black figure was observed to land by the branches of a willow and crawl away among the grass. For some half hour Sir Daniel and Hatch stood eagerly giving ear. but all remained quiet. The messenger had got away in safety. Sir Daniel's brow grew clearer. He turned to Hatch. "Bennet," he said, "this John Amend All is no more than a man, ye see. He sleepeth. We will make a good end of him. Go to." All the afternoon and evening Dick had been ordered hither and thither, one command following another, till he was bewildered with the number and the hurry of commissions. All that time he had seen no more of Sir Oliver and nothing of Matcham, and yet both the priest and the young lad ran continually in his mind. It was now his chief purpose to escape from Tunstall Moat House as speedily as might be. And yet, before he went, he desired a word with both of these. At length, with a lamp in one hand, he mounted to his new apartment. It was large, low, and somewhat dark. The window looked upon the moat, and although it was so high up, it was heavily barred. The bed was luxurious, with one pillow of down and one of lavender, and a red coverlet worked in a pattern of roses. All about the walls were cupboards, locked and padlocked, and concealed from view by hangings of dark-coloured arras. Dick made the round, lifting the arras, sounding the panels, seeking vainly to open the cupboards. He assured himself that the door was strong and the bolt solid. Then he set down his lamp upon a bracket, and once more looked all around. For what reason had he been given this chamber? It was larger and finer than his own. Could it conceal a snare? Was there a secret entrance? Was it indeed haunted? His blood ran a little chilly in his veins. Immediately over him, the heavy foot of a sentry trod the leads. Below him, he knew, was the arched roof of the chapel, and next to the chapel was the hall. Certainly there was a secret passage in the hall. The eye that had watched him from the arras gave him proof of that. Was it not more than probable that the passage extended to the chapel, and if so, that it had an opening in his room? To sleep in such a place, he felt, would be foolhardy. He made his weapons ready, and took his position in a corner of the room behind the door. If ill was intended, he would sell his life dear. The sound of many feet, the challenge and the password, sounded overhead along the battlements. The watch was being changed. And just then there came a scratching at the door of the chamber. It grew a little louder. Then a whisper. "Dick! Dick! It is I!" Dick ran to the door, drew the bolt, and admitted Matcham. He was very pale, and carried a lamp in one hand and a drawn dagger in the other. "Shut me the door," he whispered. "Swift, Dick! This house is full of spies. I hear their feet follow me in the corridors. I hear them breathe behind the arras." "Well content you," returned Dick. "It is closed. We are safe for this while, if there be safety anywhere within these walls. But my heart is glad to see you. By the mass, lad, I thought ye were sped. Where hid ye?" "It matters not," returned Matcham. "Since we be met, it matters not. But, Dick, are your eyes open? Have they told you of tomorrow's doings?" "Not they," replied Dick. "What make they tomorrow?" "Tomorrow or to night, I know not," said the other. "But one time or other, Dick, they do intend upon your life. I had the proof of it. I have heard them whisper. Nay, they as good as told me." "Ay," returned Dick, "is it so? I had thought as much." And he told him the day's occurrences at length. When it was done, Matcham arose and began in turn to examine the apartment. "No," he said, "there is no entrance visible. Yet 'tis a pure certainty there is one. Dick, I will stay by you. An ye are to die, I will die with you. And I can help. Look, I have stolen a dagger. I will do my best. And meanwhile, an ye know of any issue, any sally port that we could get opened, or any window that we might descend by, I will most joyfully face any jeopardy to flee with you." "Jack," said Dick, "by the mass, Jack, y' are the best soul and the truest and the bravest in all England. Give me your hand, Jack." And he grasped the other's hand in silence. "I will tell you," he resumed. "There is a window out of which the messenger descended. The rope should still be in the chamber. 'Tis a hope." "Hist!" said Matcham. Both gave ear. There was a sound below the floor. Then it paused, and then began again. "Some one walketh in the room below," whispered Matcham. "Nay," returned Dick, "there is no room below. We are above the chapel. It is my murderer in the secret passage. Well, let him come. It shall go hard with him." And he ground his teeth. "Blow me the lights out," said the other. "Perchance he will betray himself." They blew out both the lamps and lay still as death. The footfalls underneath were very soft, but they were clearly audible. Several times they came and went, and then there was a loud jar of a key turning in a lock, followed by a considerable silence. Presently the steps began again, and then, all of a sudden, a chink of light appeared in the planking of the room in a far corner. It widened. A trapdoor was being opened, letting in a gush of light. They could see the strong hand pushing it up, and Dick raised his crossbow, waiting for the head to follow. But now there came an interruption. From a distant corner of the moat house, shouts began to be heard, and first one voice and then several crying aloud upon a name. This noise had plainly disconcerted the murderer, for the trapdoor was silently lowered to its place, and the steps hurriedly returned, passed once more close below the lads, and died away in the distance. Here was a moment's respite. Dick breathed deep, and then, and not till then, he gave ear to the disturbance which had interrupted the attack, and which was now rather increasing than diminishing. All about the moat house feet were running, doors were opening and slamming, and still the voice of Sir Daniel towered above all this bustle, shouting for Joanna. "Joanna," repeated Dick. "Why, who the murrain should this be? Here is no Joanna, nor ever hath been. What meaneth it?" Matcham was silent. He seemed to have drawn further away. But only a little faint starlight entered by the window, and at the far end of the apartment, where the pair were, the darkness was complete. "Jack," said Dick, "I wot not where ye were all day. Saw ye this Joanna?" "Nay," returned Matcham, "I saw her not." "Nor heard tell of her?" he pursued. The steps drew nearer. Sir Daniel was still roaring the name of Joanna from the courtyard. "Did ye hear of her?" repeated Dick. "I heard of her," said Matcham. "How your voice twitters! What aileth you?" said Dick. "'Tis a most excellent good fortune, this Joanna. It will take their minds from us." "Dick," cried Matcham, "I am lost. We are both lost. Let us flee if there be yet time. They will not rest till they have found me. Or, see, let me go forth. When they have found me, ye may flee. Let me forth, Dick. Good Dick, let me away." She was groping for the bolt, when Dick at last comprehended. "By the mass!" he cried. "Y' are no Jack. Y' are Joanna Sedley. Y' are the maid that would not marry me." The girl paused, stood silent and motionless. Dick, too, was silent for a little. Then he spoke again. "Joanna," he said, "ye have saved my life, and I have saved yours, and we have seen blood flow, and been friends and enemies. Ay, and I took my belt to thrash you, and all that time I thought you were a boy. But now death has me, and my time's out, and before I die I must say this. Ye are the best maid and the bravest under heaven, and if only I could live, I would marry you blithely, and live or die, I love you." She answered nothing. "Come," he said, "speak up, Jack. Come, be a good maid, and say ye love me." "Why, Dick," she cried, "would I be here?" "Well, see ye here," continued Dick, "an we but escape whole, we'll marry; and an we're to die, we die, and there's an end on't. But now that I think, how found ye my chamber?" "I asked it of Dame Hatch," she answered. "Well, the dame's staunch," she answered. "She'll not tell upon you. We have time before us." And just then, as if to contradict his words, feet came down the corridor, and a fist beat roughly on the door. "Here!" cried a voice. "Open, Master Dick, open!" Dick neither moved nor answered. "It is all over," said the girl, and she put her arms about Dick's neck. One after another, men came trooping to the door. Then Sir Daniel arrived himself, and there was a sudden cessation of the noise. "Dick," cried the knight, "be not an ass. The seven sleepers had been awake ere now. We know she is within there. Open then the door, man." Dick was again silent. "Down with it," said Sir Daniel. And immediately his followers fell savagely upon the door with foot and fist. Solid as it was, and strongly bolted, it would soon have given way; but once more fortune interfered. Over the thunderstorm of blows the cry of a sentinel was heard. It was followed by another. Shouts ran along the battlements; shouts answered out of the wood. In the first moment of alarm it sounded as if the foresters were carrying the moat house by assault, and Sir Daniel and his men, desisting instantly from their attack upon Dick's chamber, hurried to defend the walls. "Now," cried Dick, "we are saved." He seized the great old bedstead with both hands, and bent himself in vain to move it. "Help me, Jack, for your life's sake, help me stoutly!" he cried. Between them, with a huge effort, they dragged the big frame of oak across the room, and thrust it endwise to the chamber door. "Ye do but make things worse," said Joanna, sadly. "He will then enter by the trap." "Not so," replied Dick. "He durst not tell his secret to so many. It is by the trap that we shall flee. Hark! The attack is over. Nay, it was none." It had indeed been no attack. It was the arrival of another party of stragglers from the defeat of Risingham that had disturbed Sir Daniel. They had run the gauntlet under cover of darkness. They had been admitted by the great gate, and now, with a great stamping of hoofs and jingle of accoutrements and arms, they were dismounting in the court. "He will return anon," said Dick. "To the trap!" He lighted a lamp, and they went together into the corner of the room. The open chink through which some light still glittered was easily discovered, and, taking a stout sword from his small armoury, Dick thrust it deep into the seam, and weighed strenuously on the hilt. The trap moved, gaped a little, and at length came widely open. Seizing it with their hands, the two young folk threw it back. It disclosed a few steps descending, and at the foot of them, where the would-be murderer had left it, a burning lamp. "Now," said Dick, "go first and take the lamp. I will follow to close the trap." So they descended, one after the other, and as Dick lowered the trap, the blows began once again to thunder on the panels of the door. End of Book 2, Chapter 3.